Hello, and welcome to myfinancesteacher.org. I'm happy to report that in the last couple of weeks, we've been receiving a few very interesting comments and questions. Both I and my colleague David are happy about that. We always welcome your comments, and we hope that you don't mind that sometimes it takes a while, maybe a day or even sometimes a couple of days, for us to reply to you in detail. For now, though, in this video, I want to have a look at our usual suspects. That's precious metals, cryptocurrencies, and the general stock market. And we're going to start with gold. To be honest, my general position on gold hasn't really changed. I'm waiting for that intermediate cycle low, which I think will be a very nice buying opportunity, but I think we still have to wait for possibly a few weeks for that opportunity to play out. A few days ago, on the 12th of August, looks like we've started a new short-term daily cycle. These cycles usually last for about 1.5 months or so in gold, so I still expect gold to generally trend downwards for a short while. The intermediate cycle is now 157 days old. Usually these last for about a half a year, so that's about 180 days. So looks like we have just a few weeks until the normal duration for the intermediate cycle. Of course, sometimes these cycles might be a little bit shorter than normal duration, or sometimes a little bit longer than that normal duration. But in either case, I think sometime in September we might see a really nice buying opportunity in precious metals. Let's have a look at optimism index on gold. At the moment it's at 58. And although within the last year, in the second half of 2019 and early 2020, the intermediate cycle lows came with this optimism index pretty high, somewhere around 50. If you look a little bit further back into history, intermediate cycle lows actually took place when the optimism index was much closer to this green line, much closer to the level of 30. So just as I've already mentioned, I still want to wait to see this optimism index a little bit lower. Next, let's have a look at the US dollar. To be honest, in one of my previous videos on the US dollar, I thought that the US dollar did actually finish its short-term daily cycle a couple of weeks earlier over here on the 6th of August. But we've seen a continued decline since then without any strong bounce which would tell us that a new short-term daily cycle had started. So we have to adjust, bringing the end of the previous short-term daily cycle to the 18th of August. Given the positive divergence on RSI, which means that RSI is showing us higher lows versus lower lows on the price chart itself, and given that dollar has already poked a few times through the lower range of the Bollinger Bands, even when they were wide enough in late July, and given that the short-term daily cycle is already 69 days old, with a usual duration, as you see over here, of 59 days, so about a couple of months, I think there is a pretty good chance that over the last few days, dollar is starting a new short-term daily cycle, and we will see some sort of a bounce in the US dollar. That might actually provide some pressure on precious metals prices. Whether the intermediate cycle in the US dollar has finished on the 18th of August or not, still I think remains to be seen. These cycles usually last for slightly over half a year, I think, for the US dollar, and the ongoing intermediate cycle is only 168 days old. We're just slightly below the usual duration, so there is a good chance that the intermediate cycle in the US dollar did actually finish a few days ago, in which case the bounce in dollar will be quite strong. But there's also a chance that the intermediate cycle will continue, in which case the bounce will be short-lived, followed by another decline into the end of the intermediate cycle. In either case, short-term bounce in US dollar might actually imply short-term weakness in precious metals. Although this correlation at the bottom part of the chart, correlation between US dollar index and gold price, is weakening over the last few days. Next, let's have a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin's cycle is at the moment 58 days old. Usually these cycles last for about a couple of months. The average over the last couple of years is 64 days. We see that RSI is showing us a negative divergence. That's lower lows on RSI versus higher highs on the price chart itself. And we see that Bitcoin has poked already several times through the upper range of the Bollinger Bands, even when they were wide in early August. Since late July, Bitcoin has been in this uptrend where we have seen higher lows on Bitcoin accompanied by higher highs. I would really like to see this pattern broken into the end of the Bitcoin cycle For that reason, I still expect Bitcoin to slide down over the next maybe 1 or 2 weeks. Although one might argue that there is a small chance that the Bitcoin cycle did finish over here on the 22nd of August, giving us a 56 days long Bitcoin cycle. This is a possibility based on the cycle duration, but based on how little Bitcoin came down for that short-term decline, I think the possibility is greater that Bitcoin cycle continues for another 1 or 2 weeks to give us a more recognizable low. And that's what I'm waiting for to jump into my cryptos allocation in the fictitious portfolio 1. Next, looking at the optimism index in Bitcoin, we see that usually it is a good idea to buy when this optimism index is somewhere around 30. Even if it's not at the green line, somewhere around 30 is generally a good idea to start accumulating some Bitcoins. Even in the recent cycle low, which was near the end of June, when the decline was relatively modest, this optimism index still came pretty close to that green line. At the moment it's a little bit high, although I'm not sure what's wrong with this chart. The text shows that the last reading is at about 33, while the chart shows that the index is still pretty high. In either case, I'm still waiting for a nicer buying opportunity in Bitcoin. Continuing to talk about Bitcoin, we're going to look at grayscale premiums. And these premiums also indicate some sort of sentiments in the market. When the premiums are very, very low, that's when nobody wants this asset. Figuratively speaking, that's when the blood is on the streets, and that's when you want to buy. When the premiums are high, that's when everybody wants this asset and they're happy enough to pay higher premiums. We remember that cycle lows in Bitcoin were over here sometime around mid-March, followed by another cycle low somewhere here near the end of June. So it's generally a nice idea to look for a cycle low when this premium is somewhere around 10%. At the moment, it's above 20%, which also tells me that I still want to wait for a nicer buying opportunity in Bitcoin. Moving on to Ethereum, the Ethereum cycles are also nearly 2 months long, although they're a little bit shorter than those on Bitcoin. Over the last couple of years, the average was around 52 days. That gives me that, well, there is maybe a good chance that the ongoing Ethereum cycle did finish on the 22nd of August, which would give us a cycle with a duration of around 56 days. The 14-day RSI only came down to 52, which is not very low, and the decline since the cycle low was only around 13%. Compare that to the previous decline in a very mild cycle decline of around 16%, and that is why I think there is actually a good probability that Ethereum cycle also stretches a little bit to give us a nicer buying opportunity. On the other hand, though, if Ethereum closes convincingly above this 20-day moving average, above the midpoint of the Bollinger Bands, I might have to reconsider the possibility that the previous cycle in Ethereum did actually finish over here with this local low on the 22nd of August. Looking at Ethereum premiums, they're actually a little bit more difficult to read because the volatility in these premiums is really, really huge. They range anywhere from around 100% premiums to above 900% premiums. But still, in March over here, you see some noticeable decline in these premiums. That's probably somewhere around from 450% down to below 300%. That's when we've seen one of the cycle lows in Ethereum. That was around the middle of March. Next cycle low was in the first half of May. That's this sort of a low in premiums. Not much of a decline, but we've also observed a similarly mild decline in prices as well. And since then, after a huge spike, premiums have also dropped quite a lot, which usually does indicate a cycle low. So if we haven't seen the cycle a few days ago, I think we are likely to see one relatively soon over the next several days. So what I am doing on my crypto investments is I'm trying to prepare for that buying opportunity, prepare some cash, and keep the eyes, ears, everything open for that opportunity to realize. Next, let's have a look at the stock market. S&P closed just below 3,400 on Friday, but the futures for today are just above that 3,400. So although S&P might continue up for another couple of days, I really do expect some sort of a mild decline within this ongoing short-term daily cycle, because the cycle is already 53 days old, and usually these last for about a couple of months. So maybe some decline sometime into the middle of September. And beyond that, I would expect a more noticeable decline into the end of the ongoing intermediate cycle. These cycles usually last for slightly over half a year as well, and this one is 151 days old. So another 1 or 2 months into a nicer buying opportunity in the general stock market. The chart itself has already given us a few pokes through the upper range of the Bollinger Bands. Usually that is an indication of an upcoming top in the chart. And RSI, although it's not into overbought area yet, it's pretty close to overbought, so there is still potential for S&P to trend a little bit higher over the next few days, maybe for RSI to poke into the overbought area before that mild short-term decline takes place. Looking at the optimism index, as you see, it's pretty high, it's above red line at 73. Usually that indicates an intermediate cycle top. Again, you want to buy when this optimism index is pretty low, maybe close to the green line, at least close enough to that level of 40. So buying right now, I don't think it's a great idea. Next, looking at the CNN Fear and Greed Index, it's at 70. You see that usually the intermediate cycles stop somewhere around the level of 80. So again, this Fear and Greed Index is pretty high right now. The market is greedy at the moment, although not extremely greedy, so there is still some potential for markets to move even higher, even further into extreme greed. But I don't want to buy right now. I don't want to chase the market right now. I want to buy when this needle into this red area. And lastly, let's have a look at put-call ratio on the general stock market as well. This is also some sort of a sentiment indicator. When the ratio of puts to calls is very high, that's when everybody wants to sell the market. That's when, figuratively speaking, the blood is on the streets. As it was over here at this spike in March, when S&P dropped quite significantly. So at the moment, the put-call ratio is pretty low at 0.45, meaning that the markets are generally trying to buy right now, and that's not the time when I want to chase the markets. So in summary, I'm still in waiting mode on all of these markets, but my anticipation is highest on the cryptocurrency markets, as the cycles are already getting quite old, and I am expecting a cycle low relatively soon, if it didn't already happen 3 days ago on Ethereum, for example. So let me know what you think. Thank you for being a member at myfinancesteacher.org. I'm glad that you are with us. And if you have any ideas, questions, or suggestions that everybody can benefit from, you are more than welcome to post a comment. That is all for now. I wish you a wonderful day and good luck in your trades.